Imagine being born in the most powerful empire on earth, ancient Rome, a city of marble and fire, a place where gods walked among men, or at least that's what people believed. Now imagine being chosen at the age of 6 or 7 to live not as a daughter, not as a wife, but as something in between, a sacred guardian of Rome's eternal flame. You would leave your family behind, take a vow of chastity, and dedicate 30 years of your life to the goddess Vesta. This would be your life as a Vestal virgin. In the heart of ancient Rome stood the Temple of Vesta, near the Roman Forum. It wasn't the largest temple, but it was one of the most important. Inside, a fire burned day and night, a flame that symbolized the life and spirit of Rome itself. As long as that fire stayed lit, the empire would endure. But if it ever went out, it was believed disaster would strike. And so, to protect that sacred fire, Rome turned to a small group of women, unlike any others, the Vestal virgins. Every few years, the Pontifex Maximus, Rome's high priest, would select a new Vestal virgin. She had to be from a noble family, between the ages of 6 and 10, and free of any physical or moral flaw. If chosen, the child was led to the Temple of Vesta in a public ceremony. Her parents were not allowed to refuse. The moment she crossed the temple's threshold, her old life ended forever. She was no longer her father's daughter. She was now a daughter of Rome. The state became her family. The goddess Vesta became her mother. On her first day, the little girl would be dressed in white robes, symbols of purity and sacred service. Her hair would be cut short. She would repeat an oath of chastity and loyalty before the gods. From that moment, she belonged to the fire. She could no longer laugh or play like other children. She would live inside the house of the Vestals, a secluded building behind the temple, surrounded by marble columns and statues of the women who came before her. This would be her world, silent, ritualistic, eternal. Each Vestal virgin served for 30 years, divided into 3 stages. The first 10 years, training. She learned prayers, rituals, and the secrets of the temple. She was taught how to clean the sacred hearth, prepare offerings, and maintain the flame. The next 10 years, service. She would perform the rituals herself, feeding the flame with sacred wood, preparing salt cakes for ceremonies, and participating in major religious events. The final 10 years teaching? By then, she would train new initiates, passing down everything she had learned. After 30 years, she was free, a rare privilege for a Roman woman. She could own property, make a will, and even marry, but few ever did. After a lifetime of silence and ritual, freedom felt foreign. A Vestal's life was a mix of honor and isolation. They were treated as living symbols of Rome's purity. Their presence was considered sacred. They sat in special seats at games, were greeted with reverence in the streets, had the power to free condemned prisoners simply by touching them. If a criminal was on his way to execution and happened to meet a Vestal virgin, he was immediately pardoned. It was said the gods themselves spoke through these women. The honor came with immense pressure. If the sacred flame ever went out, it was seen as an omen, a sign that the goddess had turned her back on Rome, and the blame always fell on the Vestal, responsible for guarding it. Perhaps the most haunting part of a Vestaless life was the punishment for breaking her vow of chastity. To the Romans, a Vestaless purity was not just personal, it was political. If a Vestal lost her virginity, it was believed that Rome itself would fall into chaos. And so, the punishment was unlike anything else in Roman law. Because no one was allowed to spill the blood of a sacred priestess, she could not be executed. Instead, she would be buried alive. When a Vestal was found guilty of impurity, the city would fall silent. At night, she would be led through the forum by torchlight, the entire city watching in mournful stillness. She was taken to a small underground chamber just outside the city walls. Inside was a small bed, a lamp, a few pieces of bread and water, symbols of mercy that mocked the horror of her fate. The priests would lead her inside, close the entrance, and seal it with earth. No one would ever speak her name again. It was said that when a Vestal died this way, the sacred fire flickered as if the goddess herself mourned. Yet despite the cruelty of their vows, the Vestals were among the most powerful women in Rome. They lived free from the authority of men. They could manage their own money and testify in court, rights denied to almost all other Roman women. They attended royal banquets, state ceremonies, and religious festivals. Even emperors treated them with respect. A single word from a Vestal could alter a political decision or spare a life. They walked a fine line between divinity and humanity, half worshipped, half imprisoned. At night, the temple grew silent. Outside, Rome buzzed with life: markets, taverns, gladiators, and senators. But inside the temple of Vesta, time stood still. A Vestal would kneel by the sacred hearth, her face lit by the orange glow. She would whisper ancient prayers, words passed down for centuries. The smell of olive oil and incense filled the air. Each crackle of the fire was like the heartbeat of Rome itself. And as she watched the flame dance, she knew her life was not her own. She was living for something bigger, the survival of an empire. The flame represented more than divine power. It symbolized the continuity of Rome. Every marriage, every festival, every triumph of the empire was tied to this sacred fire. The Vestals were the keepers of ancient secrets, rituals lost to time, chants that no one else was allowed to hear. Even their daily routines had spiritual meaning. Their white robes symbolized purity. Their braided hair represented discipline. Their silence, obedience. They were living symbols of order in a chaotic world. For nearly 1,000 years, the Vestal virgins tended the sacred fire. But as the Roman Empire shifted and Christianity began to rise, the old gods started to fade. In the year 394 AD, Emperor Theodosius officially banned pagan worship. The Temple of Vesta was closed. The eternal flame burning for centuries was finally extinguished. The last Vestal virgins quietly disappeared into history. Their names were forgotten, but their legend remained, whispered in ruins, carved in marble, immortalized in myth. Today, when we walk through the ruins of the Roman Forum, we can still see the remnants of the House of the Vestals. Its marble statues, weathered but proud, still stand in silence. They are reminders of a strange paradox, that the most sacred women of Rome were also its most confined. They held the flame that defined an empire, yet they were never truly free to live their own lives. Their existence raises a question that echoes through time. How much of ourselves must we sacrifice for the greater good? The Vestal virgins were not just priestesses. They were Rome's soul, its living heartbeat, its eternal promise. And even though their flame has long gone out, their story still burns in the quiet lessons of duty, sacrifice, and faith that shaped the ancient world.